The year is 1985. Diana Ross released her first hit away from Motown and it's called Why Do Fools Fall in Love, when in reality the song was released in 1981. But anyway, there is one problem. Diana Ross's song is a cover. While in prison for petty theft, Elizabeth Waters, the former wife of Frankie Lymon, decided to contact a lawyer about this whole ordeal. With Lymon being deceased since 1968, his royalties should go to the widow. Elizabeth believes she's the rightful widow and is entitled to Frankie's estate. Well, after her stint in prison ends, Elizabeth goes to see Morris Levy and is in for a surprise. Two women, Zola Taylor and Amira Eagle, show up for the same reason since Frankie never divorced his wives. So, who is the real Mrs. Frankie Lymon? This is To Tell the Truth, Why Do Fools Fall in Love edition.
I'm Miss Frankie Lymon.
I'm Mrs. Frankie Lymon.
I am Mrs. Frankie Lymon.
Jesus Christ, it's a damn game show.
Before we begin, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. It costs free $99, it helps out the channel, and you'll have zero regrets doing it. So without further ado, on to our feature presentation. April 1986, the court case over Frankie Lymon's estate begins. But before we get to the wives, we need to get the story of Frankie's background, and to assist with that, we are introduced with Richard Barrett, who managed Frankie Lymon and the teenagers. The film flashes back to 1955 with the teenagers singing outside Richard's window. Once he finds out that the lead singer Herman Santiago and Frankie Lymon wrote Why Do Fools Fall in Love, he decides to take them in. Richard had connections to Morris Levy, who was looking for Latin talent to record, and Richard sold to Levy that they were a Latin group, which they were not. They were a biracial group, which was rare for the 50s. But on the day of their audition, Herman is unable to sing due to an illness. Frankie volunteers to fill in and blows the mind of Morris Levy, and he signs them to his label. After Barrett's testimony, a close friend of Lymon named Richard Penniman, played by Little Richard, and it was very awesome that they got the real Little Richard to appear in this movie, but after he makes his grandiose entrance in annoying the judge, he takes us back to 1955. During the Alan Freed show, Frankie decides to go straight for home plate and kiss Zola Taylor of the Platters. Frankie goes on stage and the crowd goes wild. On a live television show, he gets caught dancing with a white girl, and this did not please Southern audience, and the show gets canceled shortly after. And to pour salt on the wound, footage of that moment have been since destroyed. But this does not stop Frankie Lymon from being a sensation. Frankie is still trying to win Zola Taylor's heart, but she's still playing hard to get. But after displaying a decent gesture to a random stranger, Zola caves in and decides to get to know Frankie. Frankie talks about his dad being an alcoholic and how he doesn't want to become him.
No matter now. He was a drunk. Anytime I turn around, he was beating on us.
Frankie and the teenagers' run only lasts about 18 months. They break up after Boris begins shipping music by just Frankie Lymon, no teenagers. And Frankie tries to plead with Herman that it was not his decision, but Herman doesn't want to hear it and they get into a fight.
There's no teenagers. There's no group. There's no nothing. This so planned from the gate, wasn't it? You knew all along. We were family.
After which, Zola tries to console him. Wow, teenagers drinking champagne. Just remember, Zola is about 17 to 19 and Frankie is about 14 to 16. And they have a nightcap shortly after. Wife number 1, Elizabeth Waters Lymon. Occupation, petty thief. Married to Frankie from 1964 to 1965. In 1961, Frankie meets Elizabeth Waters. Frankie saves her from another shoplifting venture, and he invites her and Trudy Proud to one of his shows. But before his performance, Red Fox is taking the stage. Unique because Red Fox is Larenz Tate's grandfather on the television show The Royal Family. Frankie sings Goody Goody, brings Elizabeth on stage, and he unbuttons his shirt. But Zola calls BS on that story because we can't imagine Frankie performing with an open top. But moving on, they go to Zola's apartment and, well, they go through tunnels, a firework explodes, and a game-winning touchdown was scored despite having track marks on his arms. They end up moving in an apartment and Trudy Proud tells her beware of Frankie as he has a habit.
The boy got a $10 a day habit. Where you hear that lie from? Who you think you're talking to? He's taking you for a ride, seeing it happen every day. You know, I'm from the streets. I know what it look like.
Well, by 1961, Frankie's career has all but fallen apart and his drug habits have taken over. Elizabeth is hiding money in weird places so Frankie can't find it to buy drugs. He sees Zola Taylor on television and storms out. Elizabeth spots two drug lords chasing Frankie over a debt he owes. Elizabeth fesses up and gives them the money she hid in the icebox and the mink coat Frankie gave her. They ended up evicted from their apartment, but on a trip to Virginia, they go to a courthouse and get married. Back at court, we found out Elizabeth filed her marriageable status as single on the marriage license since she was still married to her original husband. Frankie managed to find a gig but wound up being a disaster. He's late and could barely hold a tune and winds up falling out. He goes to the hospital, and to help pay the bills, Elizabeth resorts to prostitution, and this fails when she's booked by an undercover cop. Once out, she is surprised to find Frankie passed out with a bottle of Cavassier next to him. He tells Elizabeth that she should move back to Philly as he's going to move to LA, and he states Zola got gigs lined up for him. And this upsets Elizabeth as she's tired of him mentioning Zola Taylor. A back and forth ensues, and Frankie grabs her prized possession, her puppy, and threatens to throw it out the window. She begs her not to drop the dog, and as he was pulling the dog back in, he bites him, forcing Frankie to drop the dog, ending the dog's existence. Elizabeth will not see Frankie Lymon again after this instance until 1965 in LA at Zola's place. Frankie invited her to Zola's house, but Zola walks in and raises all hell when she shows up. Or so we think, and this is a perfect transition into wife number 2. Wife number 2, Zola Taylor. Occupation, singer. Best known for being the female lead of The Platters. Married 1965 to 1966. Zola Taylor takes the stand and she flashes the film back to 1962. Frankie shows up to Zola's new apartment and Frankie was doped up. It was revealed that Frankie stole Zola's mink and gave it to Elizabeth, and she also informs him that she's moving to LA and is married. Well, fast forward to 1965, Zola invites Frankie to the city so she could get him some gigs. She takes him to her prized possession, her LA home, and Zola tells her that she's been since removed from the Platters due to health reasons, but started her own act, the Zola Taylor Review.
You know I'm on leave from the Platters, right? Mm-hmm. Got walking pneumonia in May. Changed me like a light bulb. 11 years. Boom. I'm out.
And this takes us to Hollywood A Go-Go, and Frankie performs the ABCs of Love, even though he did not perform that song. In reality, he mimed Why Do Fools Fall in Love. He looked like the drugs made him age multiple years, and he was missing a tooth. And it was a depressing sight to see. So kids, if you're watching this, don't do drugs. But that night, Zola and Frankie celebrates his television appearance, and they do this by going through a tunnel, witnessing a fire explosion, and a game-winning touchdown was scored. But during their intercourse, he offers to marry Zola, and they travel to Tijuana for the marriage. But according to Zola, the city lost their marriage license. Now for the pool scene. Zola confirms that she saw Elizabeth Waters there, but it was Elizabeth that was raising hell, not her. Zola then calls the police on her, gets her wig snatched before getting knocked into the pool. The end of their courtship happens when Zola goes on the road to Asia and puts trust in Frankie in her home. And 4 months later, Zola comes home and finds out that she got evicted and Frankie disappeared. That's now 2 wives and 2 prized possessions that he destroyed. After her testimony, Elizabeth tracks down Zola and apologizes, but is given the cold shoulder. Wife number 3, Amira Eagle Lymon. Occupation, school teacher. Married 1967 to 1968, his death. By this time, Frankie's life was falling apart. He caught a drug charge, and instead of him going to jail, he enlists in the army. Stationed in Augusta, Georgia, he walks in while she was showering. And is that Rev from Remember the Titans? But Frankie apologized for walking in on her, and she's blushing. Throughout the movie, Frankie has been portrayed a junkie who doesn't have his stuff together. But with Amira, she portrays him as the perfect gentleman. Most of it was true, as Frankie, while in the army, was mostly sober. They got engaged and married pretty quickly. And to celebrate their courtship, they go through tunnels, fireworks happen, and a game-winning touchdown was scored. But music has always followed him. At church, we see a young kid singing in the choir, and it takes him back as it reminds him of, well, him. But one day, Frankie gets an unfortunate visit from the army guys, as Frankie has been AWOL for months and gets a dishonorable discharge. At lunch, Zola and Elizabeth throw shade towards Amira. Elizabeth then makes an offer to Zola that if she wins the case, she's willing to split the royalties 50-50, and Zola accepts.
If I win,
We split it 50-50. You win, same thing.
Are you trying to get in cahoots with me?
Yeah, because I know I was with Frankie, and I know you was with Frankie, but her...
Back to the story, Frankie gets a visit from the mailman, and he says something totally messed up that no man should hear.
Yeah.
For real? Yeah. Oh, wow, man, wait till I tell my wife. I thought you was dead. Man, we used to dance your stuff.
And that led him to get the itch again. He tells Amira that he's traveling to New York to relaunch his music career, and this will be the last time Amira would see Frankie. Elizabeth tries to approach Amira, but she tries to run for it, and while having a drink, the women all realize that they've been played by Frankie, and for the first time, they all bond. Flashback to 1968, we can see what Frankie's final days were like. Frankie is in New York and is meeting with Morris Levy, but Morris tells Frankie that he isn't pleased on seeing him, and calls him a has-been who's never had his stuff together. He also mentioned that the music has moved on. After this failed reunion, Frankie attends an oldies review with Zola Taylor and his former friend Little Richard. Zola spots him in the audience but doesn't acknowledge him, nor does Little Richard. As he leaves, he reunites with one of the drug lords who beat him up years later, and they get acquainted. He offers him that vein juice, and as he retreats to his grandmother's bathroom, his life flashes in front of him. He relapses, and that will be the last relapse he'll ever have. At his funeral, 336 own Shirley Caesar sings at his funeral. After his life, it brought up another issue. Morris had been placing his name on a number of teenager records so he could make a bigger profit. But that's another case for another day. But for now, Judge got all the information she needs and is ready to make a decision. That night, Elizabeth finds out that the song Why Do Fools Fall in Love made Levy $4 million and not a dime was paid to his estate. Elizabeth then extends her offer to Amira and she accepts. And Zola concedes that she's not going to win the case since she could not provide the documents proving the marriage legitimacy. Which means the case comes down to Amira and Elizabeth wins the case. She pulls a Johnny Bananas and take the winnings and run. Years later, Amira filed an appeal, which she won. But the trick is, the $4 million that was believed to be Frankie Lymon's estate was only worth $15 grand, which was the original offer Morris gave her. So in the end, no one really won except for Frankie, who could finally rest in peace. What a mess we have to untangle. Now, I do want to go through the wives before I get through Frankie, but might as well start off with wife number 1, Elizabeth. I actually told Vivica Fox in person that this was one of my favorite performances of hers, but anyway, these two were not made for each other. Frankie had a drug problem and Elizabeth was a petty theft, and that pretty much was it. Wife number 2, Zola. I've done research on this relationship and it was mostly a publicity stunt, and it makes me wonder if everything Zola said in that courthouse was true. And wife number 3, Amira, the rightfully deserved Frankie estate owner. Of all the wives, she liked him the most. Also, Frankie was mostly clean throughout the relationship, but Frankie himself. There are myriad theories on who was the real villain of this movie. Some will say Morris Levy, the CEO. Some will say Zola Taylor. But I think the biggest villain of this movie is Frankie himself. For one, the drugs turned him into a person no one recognized. It was the drugs that destroyed his first marriage. He made himself so much of a liability, no showing the gigs or not showing up at all. It derailed his music career. And with Zola, he destroyed her LA home and left. The movie never showed this, but Frankie was exposed to a lot at a young age. There was no older figure to shield him from the pressures of show business, and it was that lack of shielding that got him hooked to heroin, which he got from a woman twice his age. Larenz Tate, he did a fine enough job as Frankie Lymon, but a part of me felt like he was a little too old for the role. That's just me. And one more thing that had me scratching my head was some of the exaggerated scenes. It's hard to imagine that this babyface crooner dropping a dog for multiple stories, getting doped up on drugs, among other things, but it happened. This movie is a hot mess, a chaotic mess, but not a bad mess, and I could call it an underrated black movie classic. Oh, and one more thing. The movie left off that American Bandstand episode where the crowd was shocked, confused, and let's just say the cameraman had a mission that day. But the moral of this story, if you plan on remarrying, make sure your divorce is finalized or else you'll end up with problems like this. And that concludes the Why Do Fools Fall in Love movie recap. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Please hype, like, comment, and subscribe, as majority of you watching this video aren't subscribed to this channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. The following was a JGTV production. Thanks for watching.